Please join me in welcoming her. Assalamu alaikum, Mona.
Walaikum assalam. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm so excited to be here.
Okay, so Mona, I will give you a little background. So we had a presentation yesterday about the low self-esteem of women, Muslim women. So we were talking about some causes of low self-esteem, like toxic environment, abusive parents, society and media, and excessive criticism, bullying, trauma. So I would like you to talk on these topics and give us some information about it. And in the end, I would like you to talk about how we can improve and boost our self-esteem as a women, especially as a Muslim women. Jazakallah khair.
Perfect. Bismillah. And I'm not sure typically how how you kind of run these sessions. So I don't know if there's a time at the end for questions or how you guys manage that. But certainly, if there's questions, please, I encourage all the participants to ask. And again, however you guys organize that, whether that's at the end or throughout. But I usually, when I do talks like this, I really like them to be interactive. I like it to be more of a discussion. So where we're kind of sharing ideas and talking together, I feel it's just that much more meaningful. And I learn so much as well, right? These are great opportunities for me to learn as well. And that's kind of how I see them. So I really, really do encourage and would appreciate any questions or any comments as well, based on what we're talking about today. First and foremost, I think this is just an amazing topic, Hina, that you guys have discussed and approached, because I don't think it's something that we talk enough about in general, like obviously in general about women, but certainly as Muslim women, we
Mhm.
don't, I don't think we give this enough attention, because it is such a huge thing. As I'm sure, you guys have been discussing, we know that self-esteem impacts all facets of life. Sorry, was there a question?
No.
No, okay, sorry.
That's okay.
Um, so we know that it impacts all facets of life. And I think sometimes there's a negative connotation, a negative understanding of self-esteem that we associate it with maybe overconfidence or pride, or things like that that we know from an Islamic perspective as well, that we kind of want to stay away from. We know that, we will not be entered into Jannah with even an ounce of pride in our heart, right? So I think sometimes that is misconstrued and seen as, oh, that's what self-esteem is, when it's really not, right? And self-esteem is a very Islamic concept. It's something that is encouraged throughout the Sunnah of our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as well as throughout the Quran, and many lessons that we can learn. So again, I think this is a great topic. What I thought I would do is, again, some of the topics that you guys have already kind of touched on, I can, touch on them again in a little bit more detail. But I apologize in advance, because I think there's going to be an overlap amongst many of the topics, because we can see, how they're all intertwined. It's not just kind of a black and white relationship. All of the things that you kind of talked about, like the toxic environment, childhood abuse, excessive criticism, social media, trauma, all of these things will have similar impacts on self-esteem. So there will be a little bit of overlap amongst the topics. So just to kind of let you know in advance. So Hannah, I don't know, did you want to ask me specific questions, or did you want me just to kind of go through?
Yeah, we can talk about, when the child come in this world.
Mhm.
So we can talk about the abusive parents and the environment he or she is in. So yeah, we can go about these topics, and then like the abusive parents and the toxic environment for a child.
Sure.
And then we can talk about society and media. Once you're done with these two topics, we can go to the influence of bad, society and
Yeah. Yeah.
excessive criticism the person is having from his or her environment, especially the girls. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, no, I think that's a great place to start. Bismillah. So when we look at, toxic environment, it can be very subjective. And what I mean by that is that, what I consider toxic can be different from somebody else. But there's obviously certain things that, are going to be universal, right? So when we look at, a really harmful toxic environment that's really negative, it really impacts all aspects of life. So it impacts our emotional, our physical, and our social health, right? These are, determinants of our mental and physical health. It can impact us presently, so what we're going through presently, and also future development as well, right? So when we're looking at children, when they first, and we even talk about this like prenatally, right? So when we're expecting children, even if the mother is in a toxic environment, right, or is experiencing negativity in her life, that impacts the development of the child in utero as well, right? So we can see things like low birth rates, right? We can see things it impacts the brain development. It can impact meeting developmental milestones in the first few years of life. So it really, from prenatal, we can see how the environment really impacts the development of the child, right?
Yes.
So it is so important that we keep those things in mind as well, especially as mothers, right? And I know that, there's some brothers on the call as well. So I don't mean to gear this just towards women too, but that's really important, right? So what we're exposing ourselves to, what our home environment is like, even at work, right? I know we're talking a lot about the home environment, but for those of us that work outside the home, if we're in really stressful work situations or toxic other relationships, that will impact our health, and then inevitably will impact the health of the baby as well, right? So it starts very, very beginning, right? And again, this is an Islamic concept. We know that the soul, enters the fetus, enter the prenatally, and so that baby is absorbing all of those things. Now, as the child is born, again, we look at how that toxic environment will impact relationships, right? That this child will have, and even into adulthood, adolescence and adulthood. It can specifically impact emotional regulation. And what I mean by that is how we literally regulate our emotions. So how we express our emotions, right? In my research and kind of in my practice, I really do believe that emotional regulation is one of the biggest causes of distress that we experience in our lives, right? Not being able to process and not being able to express our emotions in healthy ways really impacts our lives. And again, the toxic environment will have an impact on that. We'll see aggressive behaviors. Sometimes we might even see passive behaviors, again, very much tied to self-esteem. We can see that, children often will have low self-esteem in these environments. They'll learn to become almost invisible, right? They don't want to be seen. They don't want to cause problems. And it all leads to stress, which again impacts our physical health, which, we see that individuals that are experiencing toxic environments and over prolonged periods of time are going to be more prone to things like diabetes, heart issues, cholesterol, unhealthy lifestyles, right? So substance abuse, poor eating habits, not exercising, not being active, not being productive. These are all impacts that the toxic environment will have, and then will impact obviously our self-esteem. So how we see ourselves in the world, how we see ourselves as an individual will all be impacted by that environment. Any questions? I know that's a lot of information, but any questions on that?
या आप अपने माइक अनम्यूट करके अगर कोई क्वेश्चन है तो आप यहाँ पे भी पूछ सकते हैं, इससे पहले कि हम अपने नेक्स्ट टॉपिक पे जाएं। चलिए, आई होप अभी क्वेश्चन नहीं होगा, और हम इंशाल्लाह अपने नेक्स्ट टॉपिक पे जाते हैं जो कि
अस्सलाम वालेकुम।
जी
मेरी आवाज़ आ रही है?
जी इकरा, आपकी आवाज़ आ रही है।
जी, मेरा क्वेश्चन ये है कि हमारी जो स्ट्रीम होती है ना, वो बचपन से डेवलप होती है, जैसे हमने कल भी बात की थी। और कुछ लोगों की ऑलरेडी जो आदतें होती हैं, जो चीज़ें होती हैं, वो इतनी ज़्यादा डेवलप हो चुकी होती हैं, तो फिर उसको हम कैसे चेंज करें? लाइक
Yeah,
इट्स सो डिफिकल्ट कि हम
yeah,
क्या करें, कहाँ जाएँ?
yeah. No, and that's an excellent point. And you're right. Sometimes we feel like we're stuck in this path, or that when we develop these habits or these behaviors, or we see these things in our children, and it is really difficult almost to undo that. But what I will say is that it is possible, right? Even if we take a step back from the Islamic perspective, we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that changes hearts and changes lives. And so we always put our faith first and foremost in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the power of dua, right? I mean, I know everybody on this call knows that, but sometimes we need those reminders. Is that first and foremost, we always begin with that. Even if we look at from a scientific perspective, and we look at brain development and physiologically, the brain is neuroplastic. And so what I mean by that is the brain is constantly learning and constantly changing. So even when we have these deep-seated behavioral traits or thinking processes, you know, because of our environment or because of experiences that we've gone through, sometimes it's even our epigenetics. So sometimes it's even genetic or things that we've been exposed to. We can change. The brain is constantly learning, it's constantly adapting. It does take work. I'm not here to say that it's easy, because it is not. But it can happen. We can do it. And the first step, I would say, is recognizing that there needs to be a change, right? That's the first step. It's that awareness, it's that insight. Because without that, like agar aapke paas ehsaas nahi hai, then you can't really do anything, right? So the first step is that understanding, that insight, okay, that I need to make a change, that I have to change something either in myself or in my environment, and then begin that journey. It's like I said, it's not easy, but it is absolutely processed. SubhanAllah, the brain, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created our brains to do that, to adapt and to learn, and really to be better. I hope that answers your question.
जी,
जी, thank you
Jazakallah
so much,
khair.
sir.